The day I married Kelechi Okoro, Lagos newspapers called it the wedding of reconciliation. I called it my funeral. Standing in my wedding gown, adorned with pearls that felt as heavy as handcuffs, I searched the ornate ballroom of Eco Hotel for a friendly face. There were none, only political allies, business associates, and the calculating eyes of two families who had spent decades trying to destroy each other. "Smile, Aminata," my father whispered harshly beside me. "They're watching." Judge Ibrahim Bello, my father, had built his reputation by systematically dismantling corrupt political networks. His most famous case had been against the Okoro family patriarch, whose financial crimes had nearly bankrupted Lagos state. The case made my father a hero to the people and enemy number one to the powerful. Now, ironically, I was being married off to save him. 3 weeks ago, my father had called me into his study, his face ashen. "There are threats," he'd said, "serious ones. The Okoro family has proposed a solution." What solution could they possibly offer? I'd asked. "Marriage," he'd said flatly, "between you and their son." I'd laughed, thinking it was a joke, but my father never joked about politics. The guests applauded as Kelechi slid a diamond onto my finger, obscenely large, catching the light like a warning beacon. His smile was practiced perfect, his eyes unreadable. At 32, he'd built a reputation as Lagos's golden boy, Harvard-educated philanthropist, transforming the family business from shady government contracts to legitimate enterprises. The perfect redemption story. Too perfect, I thought. Our vows were exchanged like business transactions. Our first kiss was brief, clinical. When he whispered, "We'll make this work," I wondered if it was a promise or a threat. At the reception, Kelechi's father approached us. Augustus Okoro, once Nigeria's most powerful minister, now retired but still controlling half the politicians in the country. My father had exposed his corruption, but clever legal maneuvering had kept him from prison. "My beautiful daughter-in-law," he said, his voice smooth as oil. "Your father and I are proof that even the bitterest enemies can find common ground." My father, standing nearby, stiffened. The tension between them crackled like electricity before a storm. That night, in the honeymoon suite that felt like an elaborate prison, Kelechi maintained his distance. "I know this isn't what you wanted," he said, loosening his tie. "I'll sleep on the couch." "Why did you agree to this?" I asked. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, something vulnerable flickered across his face. "Same reason you did, family." Later, unable to sleep, I stood at the window overlooking Lagos. The city lights blurred through my tears. Somewhere in those streets were the ordinary people my father had always fought to protect. Now I was married to the son of the man who had exploited them for decades. I made a silent vow that night. I would endure this marriage, but I would never truly be an Okoro. I would find a way to continue my father's legacy, even from inside the enemy's house. What I couldn't have known then was that the greatest threat to my resolve wouldn't be intimidation or power, but the dangerous possibility that my enemy's son might actually have a conscience. And that discovering his secret would change everything. Our marital home was a fortress disguised as a mansion, a gleaming white structure in Ikoyi's most exclusive enclave, with security cameras tracking every movement and guards patrolling manicured gardens. It was less a home than a statement. The Okoros had arrived permanently at the pinnacle of Lagos society. For the first month, Kelechi and I orbited each other like wary planets. By day, we performed as the perfect couple at charity galas and business functions. By night, we retreated to opposite wings of the house. The staff whispered, but never within earshot. "You've redecorated your office 3 times, Kelechi observed one evening, finding me in the kitchen at midnight. He wore sweatpants and a faded university t-shirt, jarringly normal attire for the prince of a corrupt empire. "I need something that feels like mine," I replied, not looking up from my tea. He leaned against the counter. "This house is half yours now." "Nothing here is mine," I said. "Let's not pretend." Something flashed in his eyes, not anger, but something closer to resignation. "We have an appearance at the Children's Hospital tomorrow. Car leaves at 9. Another performance, another day of smiling beside the son of the man who had once threatened my father's life. But at the hospital, something shifted. Away from politicians and cameras, surrounded by sick children, Kelechi transformed. He sat on the floor in his expensive suit, playing games with the children, remembering their names from previous visits. One little girl with cancer climbed into his lap and fell asleep. He held her for an hour, refusing to disturb her rest. "You come here often," I said afterward. "Every week for 5 years," he replied, "though the papers only cover it when I'm launching a new wing." That night, watching him work late in his study, I wondered, was this all elaborate image rehabilitation for the Okoro name, or something genuine? My answer began to form 2 weeks later when I overheard him arguing fiercely on the phone, speaking in hushed tones about evidence and accounts. "I don't care how long it takes," he'd hissed. "I need everything documented, everything." When he emerged, his face was drawn with tension. "Business troubles?" I asked innocently. His smile didn't reach his eyes, just family matters. Those family matters became a pattern: secret phone calls, late-night meetings with people who entered through the service entrance, files quickly hidden when I entered rooms. One night, unable to sleep, I found his laptop open in the study. He'd left in a hurry when his father had unexpectedly arrived at the front gate. I should have respected his privacy. Our arrangement didn't require trust, only coexistence. But my father had raised me to pursue truth at any cost. What I found changed everything. Spreadsheets tracking millions of dollars in government funds, offshore accounts, shell companies, transcripts of recorded conversations, and most shockingly, all of it meticulously organized as evidence against Augustus Okoro. My husband was building a case against his own father. I barely had time to process this revelation when I heard footsteps approaching. I closed the laptop and slipped into the shadows, heart pounding. Kelechi entered with his father, their heated conversation already in progress. "Cannot continue questioning my decisions," Augustus was saying. "The deal with the coastal development proceeds as planned." "That land was designated for public use," Kelechi argued. "People will lose their homes." Augustus's laugh was cold. "People always lose in progress, my son. Your new marriage has made you soft. Remember who built everything you enjoy." "I remember exactly what was sacrificed for it," Kelechi replied, his voice tight. After his father left, Kelechi remained in the darkened study, head in his hands. For the first time, I saw him as something other than my enemy's son. I saw him as a man trapped, just as I was. And I realized with startling clarity that I was married to someone I didn't know at all. 3 days passed before I confronted him. 3 days of watching him with new eyes, cataloging the careful way he maintained his public persona while something entirely different simmered beneath. I chose the garden pavilion, neutral territory in our marital battlefield, secluded from staff and surveillance cameras. "You're investigating your father," I said without preamble when he joined me for the evening tea I had requested. The cup froze halfway to his lips. His expression shifted through shock, denial, and finally settled on guarded calculation. "How much did you see?" "Enough," I said. "Financial records, properties acquired through government intimidation, the hospital kickback scheme." He set down his cup with careful precision. "You shouldn't have looked through my files. And you shouldn't have married into the family of the judge who tried to take down your father," I countered. "Yet here we are." Silence stretched between us. Birds called from the garden's flame trees. Inside the main house, staff moved like shadows behind lit windows. "How long?" I finally asked. 7 years, he answered, voice low. "Since I returned from Harvard, I started noticing discrepancies in the company accounts. questioned a contract that displaced an entire fishing village for a resort development. My father told me to focus on the profit margins and leave the details to him. His laugh was bitter. I didn't listen. Does he suspect? He knows I disagree with his methods. He doesn't know I've been documenting everything. Kelechi's eyes met mine. Your father wasn't wrong about mine, Aminata. He just underestimated how protected my father was. The revelation collapsed the careful distance I'd maintained. The man I'd married, the enemy I'd sworn to resist, had been fighting the same battle as my family, but from within. Why marry me then? I asked. If you're working against him, why cement an alliance? The marriage wasn't my father's idea, it was mine. He held my shocked gaze. Your father was receiving death threats, real ones, from people in my father's circle. I suggested the marriage as protection. No one would harm the father-in-law of Augustus Okoro's only son. You were protecting my father, the ground seemed to shift beneath me, all this time. And gaining a potential ally, his eyes held mine, though I never planned to involve you. Well, I'm involved now, I said firmly. That night, in his secure study, Kelechi showed me everything, evidence meticulously gathered against his father's criminal network. Enough to destroy the Okoro Empire and half of Lagos's political elite along with it. I need one final piece, he explained. Proof connecting my father to the Minister of Lands in the coastal development scheme. There's a meeting tomorrow night at our beach house if I can record it. It's too dangerous, I said, if he catches you. He won't. Kelechi's determination was palpable. I've prepared for years. The next evening, I paced our bedroom as the hours crawled by. Kelechi had left for the beach house meeting, promising to call when it was finished. When midnight passed with no word, fear clawed at my throat. At 1 a.m., my phone finally lit with a message not from Kelechi but an unknown number. Come alone to Memorial Hospital. Tell no one. I arrived to find Kelechi in the emergency room, a gash along his temple, his expression grim. I got the recording, he whispered, but my father's security saw me leaving. They know something's wrong. He pressed a small drive into my hand. This has everything, every crime, every bribe, every person involved. We'll take it to the authorities together, I insisted. His fingers tightened around mine. It's not that simple. My father still has judges and police commissioners in his pocket. We need your father, the one judge in Lagos whose integrity no one questions. As I looked at the man I'd married, the man I'd begun against all odds to care for, I realized the truth of our situation. Neither of us had chosen this marriage, but together we might finally achieve what our families had fought over for decades: true justice. We'll finish this, I promised, together. What I didn't know was that Augustus Okoro was already one step ahead of us. Dawn broke over Lagos with ominous silence. No birds sang in our garden. The security guards had disappeared from their posts. When I tried calling my father, his phone went straight to voicemail. They're moving against us, Kelechi said, his voice tight with pain as I changed his bandage. My father must have connected the dots. A text message arrived from an aide at my father's courthouse. Judge not arrived, armed men seen at his compound. Cold fear gripped me. We need to get to my father. It's a trap, Kelechi warned. That's exactly what they expect. But there was no choice. My father, the principled man who had raised me to never bend to corruption, was in danger because of the evidence we held. We took back roads to my childhood home, avoiding the main highways where Okoro's influence could easily stop us. The compound gate stood open, a bad sign. Inside, we found my father sitting calmly in his study, not alone. Augustus Okoro occupied the chair opposite, a chess board between them. Ah, the happy couple arrives, Augustus said without looking up from the board. Two armed men stood by the door. I believe this concludes our game, Ibrahim. My father's eyes met mine, communicating volumes in a glance. Not quite yet, Augustus. Father, Kelechi said steadily, it's over. We have everything: the coastal development bribes, the hospital kickbacks, the judicial payments, all of it. Augustus smiled thinly. My own son, the ultimate betrayal. You betrayed Nigeria first, Kelechi replied. You betrayed everything our name could have stood for. Augustus sighed dramatically. And what do you imagine happens now? You give your evidence to whom exactly? The police I control, the courts where my influence runs deeper than water, he gestured around. Why do you think we're having this conversation civilly rather than less pleasant alternatives? My father finally spoke. Because you still care about your legacy, Augustus, and because your son was smart enough to send copies of everything to journalists in 3 countries this morning. I glanced at Kelechi in surprise. He nodded slightly. A precaution, he explained, in case today went poorly. The evidence releases automatically in 6 hours unless stopped. Color drained from Augustus's face. You wouldn't destroy your own family name. I'm saving it, Kelechi insisted, by ending the corruption before it consumes another generation. For a moment, the only sound was the ticking of my father's antique clock. Then Augustus laughed, a hollow, defeated sound. I built an empire, he said quietly. Everything I did was to ensure my family would never know the poverty I came from. And in the process, my father replied, you helped keep millions in that same poverty. The next hours unfolded in a blur of activity. Augustus agreed to surrender himself to the authorities, but only under my father's direct supervision, trusting no other judge in the system. The carefully gathered evidence was secured. Calls were made to those few officials whose integrity remained intact. As the sun set over Lagos that evening, I found Kelechi standing alone on my father's veranda, watching the city lights emerge. Your father will be remembered as the judge who finally brought down the Okoro corruption, he said quietly, and mine will go to prison. I took his hand. What will you do now? Rebuild, he said simply. Use what remains of our resources for restitution. Try to make the Okoro name stand for something better. Not alone, I said firmly. He turned to me, searching my face. This wasn't the marriage either of us wanted. Maybe not, I agreed, but perhaps it's the partnership Lagos needed. 6 months later, after the trials concluded and the media frenzy subsided, Kelechi and I stood together at the opening of a new community center in one of Lagos's poorest neighborhoods, built on land once slated for luxury development, now returned to the people. Do you regret it? I asked him quietly as children raced around the new playground, choosing justice over family loyalty. Kelechi watched as my father, retired but still respected, showed a group of young students how the community library would work. Family is more than blood, he answered. It's the values we choose to uphold together. He squeezed my hand. Justice was always the truest form of love I could show for my father and for you. As we walked among the people whose lives our families had shaped, for better and worse, I understood the lesson that our complicated marriage had taught us. True legacy isn't built on power or wealth, but on the courage to stand for what's right, even when it demands the highest personal cost. And sometimes, love grows strongest in the most unlikely soil, when we recognize in another the same fight that burns within ourselves.